Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and this is The Rising of Israel, titled Arise, Shine, Your Light Has Finally Come. So now we enter into the second phase of the topic that we've been delving into, the end from the beginning. In the next series of teachings, we're going to look at the verses with the end times prophecies, some we've discussed already. This is where we take everything that we have learned and we're going to put it into practice through the new understanding that we have been given for these specific crazy times that we live in. Now, over the past couple of months, you got a crash course in Jewish history and insights into the redemption that I'm sorry to say, most Jews are not familiar with at all. At all. No idea. So you are now educated more than most Jews. And so I just want to remind you and encourage you by saying this. The things we are learning about right now are the very things that we need to have on our consciousness in order for these things to actually happen. We are the ones that bring this, even though, yes, it's all part of God's plan and it is His time. Yet, we are the ones that do this. As God said, when you cried out to me together as one, that is when I responded. Obviously, God knew exactly what time that would be. This is how He works. But we still have to work, and that's what this is. So if you've been paying attention, even 50% from the beginning of these classes, you'll understand exactly what I just said. Because now that you know these things, it changes your understanding, giving you a whole new viewpoint. And that's what I want to do. You need to change. And this viewpoint is through the pure lens of Torah. Now think about how many different sources we covered over here, how many different sages' words we brought, how many prophets and prophecies, how many different commentaries. I mean, and when we look at them all, and we can easily say it's been hundreds, just over the last few months alone, we see that there is no contradiction among the sages, but rather complete harmony. They speak of different times, stages, two different messiahs, responsibilities, and scenarios. We are just now putting them all together and we are getting a clear picture, one that they themselves could not get even over the past 2,000 years. Because we have now all that information at our fingertips, and this is what we're doing. And of course, through the eyes of the Ramchal and the Gra, 300 years ago or so. Now there has been kind of like a puzzle left for us that could only be revealed during our times, of course, and again, starting from almost 6,000 years ago. The understanding is sort of beginning to formulate right now, and with that, the elevation of our souls, the greater understanding that we have, the binah, by default our neshamot are going higher. Because even if you don't understand a word of these classes, you are absorbing it all into your consciousness. Something is happening, okay? And as we have learned, nothing can happen in the heavens lest it first be unlocked down here. This is how God made it. And so, Israel, I say to you, arise, shine, for your time has finally come. So we begin with the Ramchal from his book, The Secrets of Redemption. Ma'amarei Geula. After we have discussed the two times of the redemption, the Pkidah and the Zechirah, he says, regarding these two times, it has been written in Micah 7:8. Rejoice not against me, my enemy. Although I have fallen, I will rise. Although I will sit in darkness, the Lord is a light to me. Al tismechi li ohevatai li ki nafalti, kamti. Ki yeshev bachoshech, Adonai or li. Rejoice not against me, my enemy. This is the time of the Pkidah. Although I will sit in darkness, the Lord is a light to me. This is the time of the Zechirah. But this is not the only verse where we see both stages of Geulah being mentioned and hinted at. For instance, there is Isaiah 52:2. Shake yourselves from the dust, arise, sit down, O Jerusalem, free yourselves of the bands of your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. Hitnari me'afar kumi shvi Yerushalayim. Hitpatchi or hitpatchu musrei tzavareich, neck, tzavar, shevia bat Zion. Shake yourselves from the dust. Arise, sit down, O Jerusalem. Pekida. Free yourselves of the bands of your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. Zechirah. And let's take one more from Isaiah 60, verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Here's our verse. And the glory of the Lord has shone upon you. Kumi ori ki ba'orich, uchvod Adonai alayich zarach. Zarach hashemesh, the sun shines. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Pekida, and the glory of the Lord has shone upon you. Zechirah. Now, if we look at these three verses, we see a theme, right? You've already gotten the theme. And more than that, we see at least the same word in all of them, and that word is lakum, kamti, kumi, to rise. This is what we're seeing. This is also the title of the class. Rejoice not against me, my enemy. Although I have fallen, I will rise. Although I will sit in darkness, the Lord is light to me. Shake yourselves from the dust. Arise. Sit down, O Jerusalem. Free yourselves of the bands around your neck, O captive daughters of Zion. Arise. Shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has shone upon you. So we will call the rising hakima. Okay, lakum, hakima, the rising. And now we see a very important element of this process, and here is your practical day-to-day. That is the responsibility that Israel has to first rise on our own before the Shekhinah reveals herself. Before anything goes down, you gotta rise. You gotta do a little bit of work. This is how the Pekida kicks into play. And I believe that what happened to us in the Holocaust and all the crying out thereof served as a purpose. Because after those Jews who survived hell on earth, okay, we have first accounts from my family members, my grandparents. They lost all their families, their loved ones, their entire lives, their homes, their businesses, everything. Gone. They left the death camps with the pajamas that they gave them. What did they do? They rose, literally from the ashes of their fellow Jews who were burned, many of them still burnt alive. They literally rose from the actual ashes. They banded together and they made Aliyah to the land of Israel. Now, we'll get to the numbers, all right? Those that did, actually. They fought the British, they fought the Arabs, and unfortunately there was also a lot of infighting as well. Nevertheless, the heart and driving force behind this, I have no doubt, is the Jewish heart knowing exactly where it belongs, right here in Zion. Now again, I would rather not get into politics and all the other nefarious outside agendas into what I'm speaking about right now. We'll get into it a little bit later, don't worry about that. But right now I'm talking about those that returned, what drew them to return. Because I'm referring to this return to Zion in its purest form, not the secular or political Zionist. We already discussed this a few teachings ago. It's a very big difference. We're talking about the purest form of wanting to come back to the land of Israel because we are Israel. We have to be in the land of Israel and we have to build the temple. That is what the completion of is considered the return to Zion. So now what do we learn about the first return to Zion from Babylon? Somewhere between 2 and 4% of the Jews returned, probably closer to 2%. Now before the Holocaust, there were around 9.5, you could Google this, I Googled it, okay? There are about 9.5 million Jews in Europe before the Holocaust. And we know that 6 million died, although it's been more than 6 million, it's probably closer to 7. Not everybody's been accounted for, but let's say that there were 3 million left. It says about 3 million left. So out of 3 million Jews remaining in Europe, again, they murdered over 6 million. They just rounded up the numbers saying, okay, 6, but it's closer to 7. So out of 3 million survivors of Europe, only 136,000 actually went to Israel. That's it. 136,000 out of 3 million. Whatever, you do the percentage of that, all right? The rest remained throughout Europe as 80,000 migrated to the States. These 136,000 Holocaust survivors went from being cattle to warriors. and fought off the established armies of 7 surrounding Arab nations and won. They were not skilled fighters, and neither were our ancestors who left Egypt as slaves. There is no denying where we are. There's no denying who we are. And anyone who does so is either a fool or straight up wicked. Now, again, I spoke about this with my dad a few days ago, and he's like, what about all those that couldn't come into Israel? Yes, there were plenty that could not come into Israel. They came in on ships, and the British turned them away, and they threw them into prisons in Cyprus and whatnot. Many got caught up in Italy. Actually, from my several sets of grandparents, they got caught up in Italy, and some got caught up in France. My mother's father, his dream was to come to Israel, but his father before the war went to the States. So he went to the States looking for his father, the only surviving member of his family. Where on my father's side, they went from Italy, and then they came straight to Israel before the Independence Day War, and they started cultivating the land and fighting for every inch over here. So I'll give credit where credit's due. Of course, there were more than 136,000 that wanted to come, but by no means that much more, okay? Anyway, now we're going to look at these verses regarding the rising, okay? We clearly see that God is calling Israel to do the rising over here. And in the verse in Micah, Israel says, although I have fallen, I will rise, meaning I will rise on my own. I will rise. And it's important because this comes down to our own hishtadlut, effort. Remember that. God just needs to see you do a little bit, and he will meet you wherever you are at. That's the point. I keep saying this, and I have to keep saying this to myself. If we try and compare ourselves to great rabbis of even 100 years ago, I'm talking about the good rabbis, the rabbis who, gave their existence for the Jewish people. I'm not talking about rabbis who are hungry with power and what it says in the Zohar that these are all the Arab Rab in the end days, okay, and the end times. Not all the rabbis, obviously, but this is what the Zohar says, the leaders of Israel. So, if we compare ourselves even to the greatness of these people 100 years ago, we will all fall short, okay? This is by default. This is also by design. The times are getting harder and harder, and as Daniel said, knowledge is, you can't find it, right? It'll come to those who it comes to, and then the wicked will do their own thing. They'll pervert it. They'll pervert the truth. Ain't that the truth, right? Anyway, although I have fallen, I will rise. So again, it comes down to your hishtadlut, your effort. How much effort are you putting in there? If it's hard for you, just do the best that you can, recognizing. You have to be honest with God. I've had these conversations with you guys out there where don't try and play games with God. He knows everything, obviously. Your whole thing is to be authentic with yourself. And when you are authentic with yourself, by default, you are authentic with God, okay? Because what? He doesn't know your thoughts, your feelings, everything. He doesn't see everything. He's there with you every step of the way. So speak openly, and you will come to new understandings on your own through that. Okay, so we have the ishtadlut. That's the ishtadlut. However, the incentive and encouragement is always there of arise, by yourself. I will arise for yourself. God is a light to me, and the Lord shone upon me. Whenever we rise, God is a light, God will shine upon. This is exactly what he's saying. So again, this is not my opinion. I'm giving you straight up from the words of the prophets. Now, when we see the light, not with our physical eyes necessarily, but when we are able to see the light, the truth in a sense, right? That is what causes us to move, usually. It caused me to move in whatever direction. I had no clue, but until I was there. Anyway, I'm sure you guys have realized by now, in one way or another, in one form or another, that not everybody sees the light. People see a light, sure, but you also know its source based on what direction it takes them. This light of God's people does not come every day or even in every generation, but rather when there is that window opportunity, which we have been discussing. This is the light that only 20% of Israel saw back in Egypt, and only 2% of the Jews saw in Babylon. The 20% of Israel in Egypt were thrown out. As we read, they didn't even have a choice at that point, right? Those that did not get taken in darkness, there were 20%, and then Pharaoh, giresh otam, get out of my land. Because otherwise, okay, so we're comfortable here. They just won't bother us anymore. No. Get out of my land. What happened to the 2%? The 2% left on their own, right? There's so many ways to look at these verses and the real-life instances that we are facing this day. I consider the fact that we had the opportunity to return to Israel after 2,000-year-long exile as a direct sign from God. You cannot deny this. To top it all off was the significance of the year that we established our independence, 1948, the birth year of Avraham. In addition to the fact that we won every war in a miraculous way, outnumbered over 100 to 1, sometimes 300 to 1. These wars were insane. Please, Google the 6-Day War. See what happened there. Even the Yom Kippur War. The Independence Day War. Kirk Douglas made a movie about it back in the 50s. It was insane what we fought with. If you drive on the road up going to Jerusalem, you see our tanks. Our tanks were fiberglass vehicles with a machine gun on top. That was our tanks. You can shoot at it and our tank would stop, you see. We had a propeller Cessna that we would drop those old school seltzer bottles that you see in the old Bugs Bunny cartoons, the Woody Woodpecker. You spray this. My grandfather used to have those. And they make the farty sound, right? So we would drop those from the airplane and it would sound like a bomb. Boom. And the Arabs thought it were bombs, so they ran away, right? Same thing, we would roll empty barrels, wooden barrels down the mountain, and it made a terrible noise, so they thought these are bombs, and they would run away, okay? So, God blessed us with the wisdom and then with the numbers. But, yeah, you get it. Anyway, a lot of these things, and this is really what happened. Oh, and other times when we didn't have machine guns, we would take broomsticks, paint them black, and put them on the side of these fiberglass tanks for, to deter whoever. You see, this is how it was. And we won. Obviously not by our own strength or by our own might. So, the land that was once primarily an arid desert and swamplands is now flourishing with life. I saw pictures even from my dad's day back in the day of the town that I grew up in. He was cultivating the fields. Now you got roads and malls and high-rises. What happened? We are currently living in prophecy, and we are right before the days of the coming of Mashiach. We know what has to come and who is going to be in charge and everything, but look at this. These are clear signs. You cannot deny this. This is what we've been learning here. And so we know where we are. And so if all those prophecies have been coming true to the letter, then we know the prophecies about Gog and Magog and the final war, they have to take place as well because they come from the same source, right? And Gog and Magog is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, bad prophecies don't have to come true. This is true. But Gog and Magog is not to punish Israel. Gog and Magog is to collect all the evil ones and all the leftover evil nations of the world after WW3, bringing them to Israel so Israel and the rest of the world can witness their destruction. So this is a good thing for Israel, right? Okay. So we know that Israel will be tested in this generation, unlike any other generation before, and many of the sages who foresaw this, written 2,000 years ago, as we read, openly stated that they did not wish to be present during these times because of the hardships. We are privileged, no doubt. Yep, those guys, they got something, right? That's called privilege, baby. So what exactly are we waiting for? Free yourself of the bands of your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. You do this. We could all bring the redemption instantly if we remove those bands But we are in a comatose state, as most people don't even see them. Most people think, when you think, oh, hard labor, Egypt, right? You think hard labor and bondage. It comes in the forms of chains and taskmasters, beating or starvation. Oh yeah, that's bondage. Really? Your jobs, for instance, today, and the upkeep of your lives, those are your chains. Your governments are your taskmasters. And the starvation is for the Word of God. We are all starving today for the Word of God, just like the Jews were back in Egypt. So it took a different form, as evil always does, as it masks itself, pun intended, in another form to suit apparent necessity. And I bet right now there will be those listening to me saying, but what, so I should quit my job and not feed my family? Of course not. Did I say that? We already learned that all the sages had day jobs. I'm very clearly speaking of being a slave to the system and not knowing that we are slaves to the system. Because right now, we work to survive. Like you said, if you don't work, your family starves, right? How many of us just try and make it through the month? Right here. How many of us are living paycheck to paycheck? Right here. This is how most of the world is right now. It's by design, but recognize. Whether it's the end of the world in 5 years or 5 days, we still have to live in this world. You can't just say, I'm done with this, forget it all and whatever. It doesn't work that way. God put us in this physical world to elevate the physical world by elevating ourselves. You see, physically, they got you. They got us physically, right? They got us all. No one is immune to that. But that's a physical element within all the other elements. And the physical element is the lowest element and the lowest form of existence. Don't give them your mind. Do not give them your heart. Do not give them your consciousness. Make a separation despite everything happening around us. This is what you need to focus on. Wake up, Neo. You must know that this world at its best does not come close to how good things actually could be. Free yourself of the bonds. It all starts up here. Free your mind, Neo, right? Free your mind. Understand this. And this is how we live. Because if you don't have this consciousness, then you are no better than the walking dead. Yes, the zombie apocalypse has already begun. See, they put on all these other zombie shows because you think zombies walk around like, but zombies actually walk around like this. See what I'm saying? That's what it is. I need what they tell me I need, and that's it. Walking around like herds of mindless sheep. Bleh. That's it. We are currently living in a zombie apocalypse. Look around you, right? This world has no future the way it is. It has run its course. I hope you see that. This is not gloom and doom, because I know what comes next. It's actually very exciting. So this is what separates the real Israel from the rest of the world, because the real Israel understand exactly what I'm saying, and they see exactly what I'm saying right now, because I'm bringing everything from the verses right now. We must understand there is no future for Jews anywhere else but here. Rise. Shir HaShirim Rabbah. Chapter 5:4 discusses the verse in Shir HaShirim of chapter 5:5. Shir HaShirim 5:5, here's the verse I'm going to read, and this is discussed from Shir HaShirim Rabbah 5:4. Sorry, that was a little confusing. Anyway, I arose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, and my fingers with flowing myrrh upon the handles of the lock. Kamti, אני לפתוח לדודי וידיי נטפו מור ואצבעותיי מעובר על כפות המנעול. Our sages say, I arose, I, and not the nations. Although Cyrus was the one who gave the order. Who rose? when Cyrus gave the order, which is at the beginning of Ezra. Here, a few verses later in Ezra 1:5. And the heads of the families of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites arose, with all whom God inspired to ascend to build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. Make no mistake of it. I've heard things from other countries that where their country is where they need to build the house of the Lord. It clearly says here, can't even argue with this. So again, with all whom God inspired to ascend. Okay, do you think it's been any different over the past 2,500 years? The proof is in the pudding. I got to come up with another. Is there another phrase for the proof is in the pudding? I just think pudding, and yeah, you know what I'm saying. All right, what have we been discussing here for the past 3 years? If you are who you say you are, then what are you doing about it? See, that's what I'm saying. Like, people like to say, I am Israel. If you are Israel, are you living as Israel? No, right? Truth be told, most of Israel today is also not living as Israel, but that's no excuse. Don't look at anyone else, look at yourself. That's the whole point here. If you are who you say you are, then what are you doing about it? To say you are Israel, but you don't live like Israel. To say you are an Orthodox Jew, but you don't live like an Orthodox Jew. To say you're spiritual, right, okay, but excuse any command that might hinder your lifestyle, because, you know, God knows my heart, they say. And yeah, he does, and your heart is lazy. Show me the money, or in biblical terms, it's called Naseh v'nishma. We will do, and we will listen. First we will do whatever you have to say. Not we will listen and we will think about it. Not we will listen and we will decide what suits us. We will do before we hear what's in there, because we are hungry and thirsty for your words, because we trust the source. And God is good. So just like God personally inspired only 2% to return to Zion after the Babylonian exile, and just like God called out in Exodus, speak to the children of Israel and have them take from me and offer Exodus 25. I'm sorry, this is Parashat Tulma. For every person whose heart inspires him to generosity. God's going to put out the feelers, and whoever comes, that is who needs to belong. See, this is the difference, and I've said this before a lot, right? So the whole Christian and Messianic thing, I'm just giving you practical examples. They'll tell you there, go on the street corner, go talking to people, go, have you heard the good news? You could save a bunch of money by switching to Geico, right? And all that stuff. Just get in people's faces, talking, street corners and the loudspeakers. What does Chabad do? What did the Rebbe Milubavitch tell us Chabad people to do? Go establish Chabad houses. You go be that light. Whoever needs to come to you, they will come to you. Don't get in people's faces. It's obnoxious. So too is God speaking to us today, each person where they are. And by the way, over the last 2,000 years, no organization has done a greater kiruv than Chabad, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for them and for the Rebbe. Of course, may he rest in peace, for what he did. He was known for doing such kiruv. He didn't care if the Jew is Orthodox or secular or had piercings on his face or tattoos, whatever. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. And if that Jew comes to you, you do not push them away. And that's why it's so important. I'm speaking to you, you establish yourself. You don't need to go convince anybody of the things that are being taught here. You be you. You be that light. And whoever needs to come to you, they will ask those questions. And you are exactly where you need to be. This is how it is. You cannot change anybody's mind. You cannot save anybody, okay? You just have to be the best you that you can be wherever you are. Your most authentic self, because we are all children of God, okay? Okay. So, when God is speaking to us today, He's speaking to each and every one of us where we as individuals are. Now, these are people that God knows will say, Na'aseh v'nishma. What, God's going to openly speak to somebody and they're not going to do it? Nah, I don't really feel like it. because the word of God does not return void. Isaiah 55:11. So shall be my word that emanates from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, unless it has done what I desire and has made prosperous the one to whom I sent it. Or you think God's going to speak to people and like, nah, maybe we'll think about it. No, he would not waste his breath, so to speak. Okay? Do we see this pattern here in our lives today? When God called Israel to return, be it through Cyrus or anyone else, and only around 40,000 returned out of millions. We could see the numbers over there in Ezra and in Nehemiah. His call reached the few who it was relevant to. In other words, there's your proof in that pudding. Show me the money. Where are you? Somehow, from the beginning, God favors the underdog, the minority of all the nations, right? Deuteronomy 7:7, not because you are more numerous than any people did the Lord delight in you and choose you, for you are the least of all the peoples. He also didn't choose us because we are the least of all the peoples, and yet the minorities of the minorities of the minorities of the minorities are always the ones that God chose, because it started with one man. One man stands alone against the whole world. That was Abraham. That's it. And Abraham started doing the tikkun for Adam, for the whole world, for everything. It was one man against the rest of the world. And we want definitely to be on the side of that one man. And now the way things are going, we are in the extreme minority of the already minority. Like I said, I know I am doing something right when I am delivering these specific messages. And we see, like I said, those numbers, the fat trim away. Just as the 80% were taken in the darkness, so too shall Israel be pressed in ways never before seen by God. Not for the sake of hurting us or causing us pain or punishment, chas v'shalom, but for our sakes, so we know who we are. This is all for our good. And if you recognize that, you will ascend to heights. Obviously, God knows who we are, but we are about to see who Israel really is and who the Erev Rav is. It's all coming to the surface right now when you get squeezed, and we will discuss this a little bit. It's that tiny little effort that we make when we rise from wherever we have been in the world, not only geographically speaking, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's that effort that enables us to hear from God. Song of Songs, chapter 2, 10 to 13. My beloved raised his voice and said to me, Arise, my beloved, fair one, and come away. For behold, the winter has passed. The rain is over and gone. The blossoms have appeared in the land. The times of the singing have arrived, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree has put forth its green figs, and the vines with their tiny grapes have given forth their fragrance. Arise, my beloved, my fair one, and come away. Now, if you've been with me in over the last few classes, we went through this from the first redemption to the second redemption, going to the last redemption. I don't need to explain this. You guys know. Now, there are some very interesting words here from Psika Rabati. Okay, it's a Midrash Agadah. Psika Rabati 15:10 has many interesting things to say about this. Some we discussed, but I'm just going to get right to the point and just focus on the one point that I want to talk about, right? Arise, my beloved. Zarzi garmech. That's it. Zarzi comes from the word lehizdarez, hurry, or to make haste. Why? While the window is still open before it's too late. While the redemption has begun, if you do not act quickly, you will miss it. In fact, if we read the Hebrew, we'll have a better understanding of the urgency. Okay? Kumi lach. Arise for your sake. Lechi lach. Go for your sake. At this point, everyone should be thinking about lech lecha. Go for your sake. Go for your sake, as God told Abraham. And why did God tell Abraham to go for his sake? Because God wanted to talk to him on a very high level, and therefore Abraham had to be elevated to the levels of which God chose to reveal himself. So when we are called to move, when we are called to get out of our comfort zones and even stand up to the rest of the world, like I said, these times are now, which is what it's coming down to, we know that it is because God has to elevate us to the level of the revelation He wishes to share with us. Now, regarding the whole verse, the Gra discusses why it says, Kumilach, arise for your sake, and lechilach, go for your sake. Arise for your sake and go for your sake. Kumilach lechilach. Why? My beloved raised his voice and said to me, Rise, my beloved, my fair one, and come away. He says that these are the two redemptions. The redemption from servitude, which was in Tishrei, to which God said, Kumilach, arise for your sake. And the redemption from which is when their bonds of servitude were broken. And then the redemption from the exile itself, which was in Nisan, Passover, to which God said, Lechilach, go for your sake. Okay, here we go. Now the first one being the time of the Pkidah, as we have learned, as it is during the days of, as we saw during the days of Cyrus. This is why God said, arise for your sake, arise now because you still can, and be quick about it. And because the coming out of servitude is the responsibility of Israel, for they must rise on their own, that's why it's imperative that we actually do this. If we're staying asleep, we didn't hear that call, we don't get that urgency, God's not talking to us, and then you should be very scared. Those who rise on their own are those who then get the marching orders. Once you rise, that's when God says, Lechilach, Kumilach, Lechilach, arise. Yes. Okay, now what? Now go. For your sake. Now, just because we are lazy, and make no mistake, we absolutely are lazy, we are tired, we are confused, we don't know where we are. Me too. But that's primarily because we are either still asleep, just opening our eyes for the first time in millennia, and or we absolutely do not grasp the gravity of the situation that we and the world are in. This is mamash, like being unplugged from the matrix at a later age while having to adapt to reality. Okay? Not the reality of what they're selling you, but the real reality, and to do it in a very short period of time. It's like being woken up when there's an earthquake. You will be shaken. I got woken up when I was in high school a few times. I thought my dad was shaking my bed to wake me up to go to school. I'm like, yeah. And I look up, and he's not there, and everything is shaking. We got earthquakes in Israel. I mean, we got a fault line going right through Mount of Olives. It's written here 2,500 years ago, but science only found it like 50 years ago. Genius, those science guys. Anyway, it's like being woken up from a massive earthquake. What's going on? Now, the deeper the sleep, the harder God is going to shake you, because He wants everybody to wake up. He wants to give everybody a fair chance. He does give everybody a fair chance. And if you still won't wake up, what do we used to do in the army? If someone didn't wake up, the whole platoon would get in trouble. You flip over the whole bed. Boom. Face plant. But now you're awake, right? Ow. Yes, you might have lost a tooth, but now you're awake. And so, 5:4, my beloved stretched forth his hand from the opening, and my inside stirs because of him. Even though you didn't get up, don't worry, you're going to get that smack. As the Gra states, since I was lazy in rising up and opening the door, God stretched forth his hand. That's mercy right there. This can be seen clearly during the times of the Second Temple, because once the 70 years have been complete and the house of Nebuchadnezzar was destroyed and the kingdom of Babylon fell, all this happened for the sake of the redemption of Israel. Those who received the call, in the next verse, I arose to open for my beloved. And my hands dripped with myrrh, and my fingers with flowing myrrh upon the handles of the lock. The dripping of the myrrh came from within. Where did this myrrh come from? It came from within, and that was the foundation of the temple, which they only managed to begin, and not complete, obviously, to begin during the days of Cyrus. And we find that the redemption can be completed if Israel do the specific actions they are called to do during the times of the Pekidah, particularly to awaken and rise. Wake up and get up. Because we saw that we are on God's clock. And one way or another, His will be done. It's up to us to decide if it's done through judgment or mercy. What we discussed last class. It's going to happen. You can go walking on your 2 feet or get dragged kicking and screaming, hitting things along the way. But it is going to happen. The longer the period is stretched out, though it be in judgment, we still have time to do tshuva on our own, to do our own correction. This is where our own deeds come in. But once that window of Pekidah is closed, we can no longer be redeemed based on our own merits. Right? That's where we discuss the achishena, that we can bring it closer if we merit it, but we're not meriting it. Let's be very clear here. We will then be redeemed based on the time of the redemption. That time is be'ita, ita, et ratzon, et, time. And that is when God will redeem all of His children, all who are Israel, like it or not. Meaning, through mercy, because mercy comes after the judgment, because we are undeserving in our current state. However, the cleansing process will be extremely painful, as we said. There's going to be squeezing like never before. This is what's happening now. That's why I urge everyone right now, if you haven't already begun your own personal teshuvah process, please get on that, because it is a process. In Psikei de Rav Kahana, chapter 21:1, it says, Rav Acha said, Israel have been likened to the olives. As written in Jeremiah 11:16, a leafy olive tree fair with goodly fruit has the Lord called your name. And God is likened to a candle, a lamp, or a flame. Proverbs 20:27, man's soul is the Lord's lamp, which searches out all the innermost parts. Ner Hashem nishmat adam, chofes kol chadrei batin. So the English translation kind of screws it up. It literally says the light of God is the soul of man, and that light, i.e. God, searches out all the innermost chambers. Now, if we combine these two, meaning the light, the lamp, the flame, the fire, and oil, right, we get a theme that has been given to us since the days of the Mishkan. What is the purpose of fine olive oil if not to be given to the fire, as they are both necessary components for the production of good light, making them one? Which is why God said to Israel, His beloved, for my light is your light, and your light is my light. Both you and I shall go and illuminate Zion together. As it is written, arise, shine, your light, meaning God and Israel, has come. So what is our takeaway from this class? If you are not working on the change in your life, perhaps you didn't hear the call, which would make you not part of Israel. Now, as much as I mean to antagonize for the sake of movement, I also don't. I know this might upset some people, but I want to move you. You should want to move you. You should want to see and know who you are. Again, wherever you are is where you need to make that specific tikkun. If you're not Israel, don't say you're Israel. It's very dangerous, because then things will be put on you and you'll be like, but I'm not. No, but yes, you are, because you claimed you are. See, it's very, not that just because you claim you are means that you are, but you're going to have to pay for your words. We're all going to have to pay for our words. That's what I'm saying. Be very, very careful. Recognize where you are and do the tikkun that you need to do where you are at. Once you do that tikkun, you will get new marching orders. We have to arise every single time. And then once we arise, God will say, go here, go there. Lech, lecha. Where do I go? In that direction. What do I do there? I'll tell you. Where do I stop? I'll let you know. That's it. He just walked. Lech lecha, go in that place. Okay, that's it, and that's it. And he got his marching orders from there. Same thing. So I believe at this point in time, God is waking up all of his creation to their own individual reality. And once those of us who need to be awake must understand and acknowledge where we are as individuals in order to act accordingly to rise. For instance, let's say I'm a Jew in the States, Orthodox, secular, whatever, and I see what's going on in my immediate environment, in my home, in my community, in my country. And I see what's going, like I really see what's going on, which at this point may as well be screaming right in your face, but people are so comatose that they don't see it. I would know that I would have to get my butt over here to Israel as soon as humanly possible, because soon enough I won't be able to. This is what the laziness that we talked about. Now, if I was a Jew in Israel and I don't really live according to the Torah, I might want to start looking into that in order to ground myself for the times coming. We need to be rooted, and this is what the Torah is. It's Etz Chaim Hi. She is the tree of life. If I were a Gentile in the States, I would absolutely recognize the God of Israel while completely cutting, in every sense of the word, all my idolatrous thoughts and past. We all came from a place, right? Because if you have the same beliefs as a pastor, a preacher, or a messianic rabbi, you're still in idolatry. And then by default, that tug that you feel in your heart, it can never be answered because you're not letting go that which you need to let go. There, you have those feelings of not being fulfilled, those feelings of heartbreak, because someone told you that if you don't go through him, then you don't have salvation, redemption, you don't go through God. You don't see how that's idolatry within itself? Come on now. Wake up, Israel, or not Israel. See? Good, get angry. It works. You have to understand, the same thing. Abraham himself welcomed all. I said, this is the tent of Abraham and all are welcome. I'm following my father Abraham's footsteps, okay? All were welcomed in his tent, but you had to leave your idolatry at the door, right? Abraham's thing was to abolish idolatry, false narratives, false prophets, replacement theology. He smashed his father's idols. See, this is what it was. You want to talk about God? I'll teach you about my God. But leave everything that you think you know about any kind of other deity by the door. That is not welcome into my house. This is a kosher home. You see, we all have a responsibility wherever we as individuals are. I cannot do what you need to do, and you cannot do what I need to do. It's your job. It's my job. I cannot stress this enough, but it's very important for you to know. And we need to do this. And we need to do this right now. I say this because I see what's coming, and it's staring us right in the face, but most people don't see it. Here's an example for you. Last week, Thursday, our Prime Minister declared war, pretty much, on the non-compliant citizens of Israel. I'll translate his exact words. Those who refuse to get the shot are a danger to us all. And I urge anyone who knows of such people to confront them and convince them to get the shot. And do not let them go. Al tevatru lahem. Don't take no for an answer. You understand that wearing a badge is coming next, right? People aren't up in arms about this. Why? Because, over 80% or 80% of the country already got the shot, got both shots. So as far as they're concerned, yeah, sure. We need a scapegoat when we'll realize that these shots actually don't work. In fact, they do the opposite. So it's their fault because they wouldn't comply. He said this. This is an act of war. This is an act of aggression. This is an act of oppression. But no one said anything. It was just another thing that he said. This is crazy. I see what's coming. Okay. This way, everyone can identify who the enemy is. It's those who will not comply. This is how it began back in Germany. Back in the day, there are those who cause problems for everyone, for all the Germans out there. There's a small group of people, but they cause problems out there. They need to be dealt with. They need to be confronted. Yep, same thing. I would pray for this guy's soul, for the violence he incited against God's people. But then I would be praying for an Erev Rav. They got no soul, and I know who he is. And if you think it's dangerous what I'm saying, I'm quoting the Rashbi, so don't come to me. In turn, and like a synchronized clockwork, within the same day, that old fool on your side of the pond, had a few words of his own. And he said, where am I? Okay. He says, we have a pandemic in this country, and it's called the anti-vaxxers. You get the idea. Because you guys are the real pandemic. You guys are the problem. What? No, not coordinated? These two democratically, fairly elected governments have their strings pulled by the same puppet masters. And we are quickly moving into the prophecy of there is no one to lean on except our Father in heaven. So what do? Do we riot? Do we burn the place down? Do we flee to the wilderness? No, none of that. You do exactly what I told you to do because that's what God told us to do. I'm just relaying the message. This is not our fight, so don't get involved. If you get involved, you open yourself up. Keep a low profile. These messages got to go out though. See, God is the one pulling the strings of the people pulling those people's strings. Remember that every moment of every day and rejoice at that thought because it will first and foremost keep you sane and grounded. Secondly, it will abolish your fear so threats will not work on you. Why do you think everybody's, getting the magic cure? Because they're terrified. But if it will not abolish your fear, then at least make sure that your trust in God, your bitachon, your trust in God, not faith in God, trust in God is greater than your fear. You can acknowledge your fear. Israel acknowledged their own fear by the Red Sea, by Yam Suf. They were terrified, and yet they moved forward. They jumped in the water. Okay, we trust you. We are going to die, but we trust you, God. That. Now, I heard this line in a show the other day. Now, it was so appropriate for where we live. It was like a timepiece show. Anyway, one person said to another, this and that happened, and all of a sudden the world just went mad. And the reply they got was, no, this is how the world is. It always was mad. You see, those of us just waking up now might say that this just happened. The world just went mad. But those who have been dealing with this lunacy for a while now know that this is how the world is. And if you see this, you don't belong here either. See? If you think everything is normal and you're trying to go back to how things were, none of this is for you. Different language. This is different existence, different reality. And to all those listening out there to this message, free yourself from the bands of your neck. You free yourselves. Align yourself with God. Then you too can quote the late and oh so great Frank Sinatra, who said, "For what is a man, what has he got? If not himself, then he is of naught. To say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows, and I did it my way." May the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob watch over us all, wherever we may be, as we turn to Him and Him alone, both in our happiest of days and in our darkest of hours. Do your homework. Thanks for stopping by. Have a great week, and Shabbat Shalom.